All right, so you had mentioned a little bit. So we'll get to, I believe you did anyway, the shelter aspect of it, and that's the next one on my list. And again, as we talk about this, think about this if you're in a suburban or rural area. It's the same type of stuff because the supplies you might need to build, say, a lean-to shelter in the wilderness, you can find a lot of that stuff in the wilderness from trees and nature and all that. But those same principles apply to a suburban area. You may have different things that you can use for the same purpose. So you may find, like wire or 2x4s or plywood. I mean, stuff like that in a suburban area that can be used for that stuff. Whereas in a wilderness situation, building shelter may be, the branches, the leaves, and all of that stuff. So going to what your thoughts were on the whole building shelter, the important parts of learning how to build shelter.
Shelter, again, is seasonal. In the summer, you're going to want to wherever you shelter. Josh Enyart, one of his DVDs talked about the 5 W's, and that was you want to stay near but not at water. You want to check for wigglers. You want to make sure you're not putting a shelter right up where there's a snake nest there. Don't put it at a walking path where animals regularly walk through. Wind, you want to make sure that the wind is either working in your favor. If it's summer, you want it in your favor. In the winter, you want it not against you. And check for widow makers. Look up. A lot of times a stick the size of your thighs just dangling there, I think could weigh 300-400 pounds. If wind takes that down on your head, that could be your last day.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, the 5 W's. The shelters are going to depend on the temperature again. If it's summertime, you might be able to just get away with dropping some pine needle branches down the ground. Get yourself like a 3-foot mattress or dry grass and plop down on top of it and done. If it starts getting colder out, then you're going to lean-to, and then you're getting up to, if you're talking super cold, Morris Korhansky has what he called the super shelter, which was he made a lean-to, and then was a raised bed lean-to, had a Mylar blanket on the backside, and then plastic in the front, and then he had his fire in the front. Well, what that does is it lets the heat of the fire through the plastic, hits the Mylar reflects it back in, and I've seen a video where I think it was minus 25, and I think it was 64 degrees in that shelter. It was so warm.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so check that one out if you're interested in real hardcore cold weather. I wouldn't build one of those, though, if it's not warm, or if it's not really cold. The reason is I've heard of cases of people getting pneumonia because your shelter's too warm, and then when you come out of it, you're jumping from 60 degrees to minus 25 just instantly. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, makes sense. And everything you just talked about, you're kind of tackling it from the wilderness aspect. And anytime I listen to this stuff, I always think of it as, from a preparedness perspective, a prepper perspective, a bugging out or getting home type situation. So the stuff that you're talking about there, it still applies in it. Maybe there's a situation where you're working downtown. You've got to get home. And it's going to take you 24 hours or whatever to get home. You're going to have to park it at night somewhere. So you would have those same things you were talking about would be those dangers that you would need to look out for in whatever environment you were in. So you're looking for, maybe those critters are human beings. The creepy crawlies are the human beings.
If there's riots in town, I don't want to be parking my car there. Sleep,
Yeah. Another aspect of building shelter is the whole knot tying thing too. I think that is super important because along with the materials that you need to use or the different ideas you have for that stuff, if you can't get that stuff to stay together, it's not going to last you the night.
Or if you don't understand a certain knot will put tension on, you'll never get that knot back apart. Guilty of that. There's a saying, if you don't know the knot, tie a lot. But if you have to double square knot something, put some kind of a toggle in between, like especially a stick, a small twig. Let it cinch down on that. That way you can just break the twig off, and then you can get your finger in there and get the knot loose again.
Yeah. I use a lot of bank line, and I use a lot of bank line and usually a pocket knife in those situations.
Yeah, I put a what do they call it, jungle hammock up, and the weight pulled so hard on the webbing that I could not get it apart. I finally had to cut it.
Oh, no
So
kid. Yeah.
learned the hard way there.
Yeah.
So with the webbing there, if you put a stick in between, then that won't happen.
Yeah. No kidding. Okay. We jumped one right there. We talked about survival shelters. I think the very basic, learn how to do a lean-to shelter, something like that. That is something you can do in your backyard. I've done a few videos on my bug out bag, and I've got a hammock right now that I've used hammocks my whole life. I enjoy them because you get to tie them up, put them up, figure out where you're going to put them, and it's just really comfortable. Plus, I'm off the ground. I hate bugs. That stuff just bothers me. And when I'm sleeping at night, I want that peace of mind. So that's why I like them. But learn how. Well, my whole point with this is it's got a rain cover on it, a rain fly. Learn how to do that lean-to shelter. Learn how, like with me, I'm gonna do a video putting that rain fly on the ground and using that as a lean-to, kind of it's like a triangle lean-to, or I'm gonna be able to make a triangle out of it. But learn that stuff. You can do that in your backyard. You can do that wherever you want. But that is one of those things that, yeah, you never know when those skills are going to be important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Ja, you know who said Shawn would pick his wallet? He has so much in it, and I do. I've become a big fan of how small some of the stuff has gotten. In the last show, I had shown in Maxpedition, I think it's called the CNC wallet. There's a little coin pouch in the back. Well, that's where I keep a micro kit. I keep a 1 liter. It's called a Whirla bag. 12 water purification tablets, ferro rod, mini bic. I think there's about 20 feet of micro cord in there. Lock picks, know your rules in your area for those. A few other little things I keep in there, but it's amazing that what you can keep that can save your life, that you can keep on your person at all times.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Adam just made a comment and actually brings up a good point that we didn't talk about. We're talking about shelter as, building a shelter, lean-tos and stuff like that. Anything that protects you from the elements is shelter. So even like you were talking about, sorry, go ahead.
No, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Even if you're, like you were talking about earlier, with it being 70 degrees out and you're just parking it on the ground, still going to get cold at night. You're still going to need, the proper clothing and all that stuff, that protection from the elements. Even if it's just sitting next to a rock that maybe has a little bit of cover from rain and stuff like that. So that's a very good point with clothing. It really, depending on the time of year and your location and all that stuff, it's super important because that clothing is like your first layer of protection, right?
That is your initial shelter, is what you're wearing. Every time you leave the house, you should ask yourself, if I don't come home tonight, am I okay for 24 hours with what I'm wearing? So Adam nailed it. Your first line of shelter is what you have on you. I have a winter motorcycle coat or a full suit. I guarantee you, if I got dropped off in the woods or even stuck in a city and had to sleep in a cold abandoned building, I'd be fine. It's so warm. I'd just lay down anywhere and go to sleep, no problem.
Yeah. He had also mentioned in that comment, he said something like a plastic bag coat full of leaves. When you're in a situation and you are cold, this is all the stuff that you should have in your head, because you're going to be doing the MacGyver thing, right? You are going to be thinking about ideas that you've heard about, like his idea right there, just to try to stay warm. I mean, that would be a better than nothing type option, right? I mean, you may look like the Great Pumpkin,
newspapers and magazines.
What's that?
I'm sorry, there's a delay. I don't mean to talk over you. In an urban setting, even newspapers, magazines, anything that you can create space between you and your clothing is going to be something good. Yeah.
I've also got a little emergency bivvy basically in my bag, which is basically a fancy Mylar blanket that is enclosed. You could do the same type of thing with that. Now, granted, that's a sleeping situation, but I suppose you could cut a hole in the top and some little arm things and make that type of thing as well. But yeah, that's that outside the box thinking you have to do or that you would do, I think, in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's an important thing you just said about MacGyverisms. Always look at something and think of, well, how can I use this outside of its intended purpose? You know, you look at a fish hook and you think it's a fish hook. Well, if an animal, and I wouldn't suggest doing it because it's illegal unless your life's in jeopardy, but if an animal would swallow that, it would snag them and hold them. So, you know, there's just start looking at things and think, how can I use this other than what it's intended to do? MacGyverisms will save your life.
Yeah, yeah. Lisa just put in there too, and this is one last thing we'll talk about with this is your feet. Protect your feet, and this goes for whatever situation you're in, I think, because your feet, if you're in a bug out situation, and your feet get damaged or start hurting, you know, if you get flat tires, you're not going very far. So protecting your feet, keeping your feet dry. When your feet are wet, your whole body is cold. You're just miserable. And when your feet are wet, then there's more opportunity, depending on how much you're moving, for blisters and stuff like that. So your feet, I think, yeah, like Lisa said, protect your feet. One of the most important parts. Keep some extra dry socks and stuff like that. Wool socks, depending on the season.
Correct. Definitely. And if your feet stay wet long enough, trench foot's where they start getting bacteria underneath the skin, and then it gets to the point where your skin starts falling off. So
yeah.
that can be pretty ugly.
Yep.